It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and with us to talk about being pro-life, especially this month, which people call Pro-Life Month, is Trent Horn, author of many books, also the host of the Council of Trent podcast, and regular apologist on Catholic Answers Live. Thanks for being here again, Trent.
Thank you for having me.
So we're getting close to the 46th anniversary of Roe versus Wade, which, of course, is the Supreme Court decision legalizing abortion in the United States. I know maybe the legal side of things isn't your expertise, but what do you think the chances are that Roe versus Wade could actually be overturned in the near future?
Well, I would say that we're in a better position than we ever have been to see the court reconsider key provisions of Roe versus Wade. And the case that really went on to supersede Roe more, it would be the 1992 case of Planned Parenthood versus Casey. So in that case, that dealt with laws that were put up by Bob Casey, who was the governor of Pennsylvania. And the court struck down most of these laws that tried to regulate abortion, such as it struck down laws like spousal consent. Your spouse has to consent if, the husband has to consent if the wife gets an abortion. Mm-hmm. But the court actually upheld other things like parental consent laws. Parents have to consent if a minor gets an abortion. And Casey put down a standard called the undue burden. The state just can't make an undue burden on a woman who's having an abortion. So I think that that's really more, it's Roe, but I think also Casey is going to come into play for the court to reassess what role the state has in protecting and preserving human life or regulating abortion. I'm optimistic, but I think there's always going to be a pretty big ground game. Even if Roe versus Wade and Casey were overturned, that would not make abortion illegal. It would just send the issue back to the states. You have some states that would probably outlaw abortion very quickly, but other states where it would be, like where I live in California, it would be extremely difficult to make abortion illegal. And some states have already passed statewide laws to make abortion legal and make it a legal right. So I'm optimistic, but there's still always a lot of work ahead.
Do you think some of the progress that has been made over the years is a result of apologetics, the resources that are out there, people that are debating, maybe scientific discoveries that are helping to show the reality of the life of a child?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that advances that we've made in ultrasound technology, that people can just have these wonderful 3D images of not just of their children, but people have these images of themselves when they were in the womb, along with intrauterine fetal photography, has really helped to show people the humanity of the unborn in ways that are really undeniable. Also, I think that pro-lifers have become very savvy in adopting pro-life apologetics and going out and having conversations with people. And that's what I've always focused on, and I believe is really the key to helping people change their mind on abortion, is to have these conversations. Each of us needs to do that. And that's why I've tried very hard to equip people with things like my book, Persuasive Pro-Life, and hosting radio shows like Why Are You Pro-Choice on Catholic Answers Live.
Yeah, what are some of the biggest arguments you get on the radio show?
Well, the most common arguments I get, they're kind of shallow arguments. They're essentially arguments, pragmatic defenses of abortion. They say, well, we need abortion. It's a woman's right to choose. Or what about women who can't care for a child? And they really appeal to the pragmatic reasons for abortion, but without answering the question of what the unborn even are. They just completely sidestep the question. And so I try very hard, instead of arguing about poverty or women's rights, I say, look, if the unborn aren't human, you're totally right. But if they are human, we can't kill them for these reasons any more than you would kill a toddler. Then I really pose the question to them, what are the unborn? How would you defend this position? And I think that's what we really have to help people who are pro-choice see, and really get them to try to defend the indefensible and see that it's indefensible.
Do you feel like maybe because people have personal experience, either of themselves or somebody else that they know, that they become more defensive and maybe have a hard time seeing the reason behind, and I use that word like the reasoning or the truth behind the action?
Well, I think that's all of us, that when we feel guilty about something, or when we feel as if that we're emotionally connected to something. We're not able to rationally assess the issue. And we can become defensive when people accuse us of either having engaged in a grave evil or of supporting a grave evil. And we want to always think that we're good people. And so it's common to become defensive in that regard and to respond in kind of a very defensive or even a hostile way. And that's why I think it's important for us to respond to people with kindness and charity and understand that it is an emotional issue, and they may become emotional when we talk about it with them or when the issue comes up, and just give them breathing room to be able to process everything. And just to affirm those who even have made a tragic choice or supported abortion in the past, that this does not completely define who they are, and that God's mercy and love and reconciliation with him is waiting for them. A good resource to read, honestly, about that as an encouraging word for those who are post-abortive would be in Pope St. John Paul II's encyclical, The Gospel of Life, in paragraph 99. He has a special word for those who have had abortions and says they can be some of the most eloquent defenders of human life.
With the different demonstrations, marches that are coming up, especially the big one in D.C., but a lot of local marches as well, prayer events and things like that to pray for the respective life. Any suggestions on tactics or things to not do at these things, or things that we should do if we're participating in any of this?
Well, I think that when we participate in these kinds of events, when we participate in things like marches, for example, we should make our presence known and make it a positive presence for others. A rule I often say that people should follow, I say it's DBW, don't be weird. Try to
yes.
Try to keep in mind how your message or how you present yourself may be perceived by others. Now, if people see you marching in defense of the unborn, they're going to think that's weird regardless. But I mean is don't unnecessarily offend others. So I think like walking around dressed as the Grim Reaper, for example, especially standing outside of an abortion facility, it doesn't quite send the most positive message. But I think there's room within in these marches for a wide variety of ways to demonstrate solidarity in defense of the unborn, whether it's showing images of the unborn who are in the womb and alive, but also showing images of them who have suffered from abortion. Though I would say that people who are involved in these kinds of marches, they should be able to work well with each other. That especially there's controversy about bringing images of aborted unborn children to these kinds of marches, especially since young children are often participating in these marches as well.
Right.
And so I think that you should contact an organizer of a march or public event and say, would this be appropriate to bring if you want to do that? And if they say that's not what we want for this event, I think that in a spirit of humility and fraternal working together to try to combat this problem, to say, okay, I'm willing to understand that and, to abide by that rule so that large numbers of people can get together to show that they care about the unborn. And maybe those pictures could be saved for a different context, such as holding them outside of an abortion facility, for example. But ultimately, I think the number one thing people should not do at these marches, you shouldn't treat them as just like, oh, this is where we get together and, we do our little fun gathering and show we're pro-life. These are not celebrations by any means. I always say, we talk about the commemorating the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. The commemorate means we remember, co-memory, we remember this. And the reason we remember it is because we have to do something about it and we can't stop. And our goal is to keep working hard so that we don't have to march anymore. We should have that mindset, I think.
That's good. And I think that the whole issue of the images of aborted children, I think, can be controversial on both sides of the argument, and that pro-life people are sometimes offended by this and don't think that it shows the dignity of the person. Can you talk about why you think that can be an effective way of changing hearts?
I've seen it be effective. When it comes to the issue of graphic images of abortion, I believe that it is not immoral to show those images. In fact, I think it's morally good to show those images. However, I agree there can be reasonable disagreement about what is the most appropriate venue or context to show those images. I used to travel the country with an organization that would set up graphic images of abortion on college campuses and begin dialogue with students there. And the reason we did that was because we wanted to find a place where there were lots of people who were willing to talk about abortion and are thinking of having abortions, and is also a place where there are not a lot of young children who may be traumatized by seeing something like this. And a college campus is a great place to find the former, but not the latter, which would be young children. So I thought that it was effective, and we changed a lot of hearts and minds. Some people, obviously, they will get mad at seeing images like this, but we always ask them, well, why are you, I sometimes kind of would wryly joke, why are you mad at me? I didn't do this to these babies. And they're more mad about the pictures than like what is actually contained within them. I've also seen them work well in front of abortion facilities, that women choose to not go in when they see this is what is going to happen to your child. Now, on the flip side, there can be other contexts where I personally don't know if they are as effective when they're separated from the abortion context or the university debate context, where it seems out of place and people don't want to have the discussion and they're more just kind of surprised or shocked by the images and they don't want to talk about them. So I believe there can be reasonable disagreement among pro-life advocates about what is the best way to use it. I don't think they're appropriate in all contexts, but it's a conversation that's worth having.
I was just recently listening back to episode 135 of your podcast, Council of Trent. Almost a year ago, you talked about what does it mean to be pro-life. And one of the things that you talked about in that is the seamless garment. Can you just give us a short description of the seamless garment and some of the ways that might be misrepresented or misinterpreted?
Yeah, the phrase seamless garment was coined by Cardinal Joseph Bernardin back in the 1980s. And it was a call for consistency among pro-life advocates that those who oppose the killing of the unborn through abortion call them to be consistent and also oppose the killing of human beings in other contexts, things like the death penalty or nuclear war or euthanasia and assisted suicide. It was a call for consistency and to not allow the opposition to the killing of human beings to only be focused on unborn children. Now, unfortunately, that seamless garment mentality, which has a positive element to it, which is we should always be consistent with the moral positions that we hold. We can't say that some innocent human beings have value and others do not. We should always be consistent. But some people took the seamless garment to create a false equivalency among moral issues, to say that a person should be equal resources should be devoted to protecting any human life that is threatened by anything, even if it's not necessarily a direct threat to human life, but that we have to also combat poverty and unjust working conditions, and that all of these are pro-life issues. Well, if everything is a pro-life issue, then nothing is a pro-life issue. If pro-lifers are expected to solve every problem in the world, they won't solve any problem. And no one else is held to this kind of standard. And Cardinal Bernardin himself even said that not every single life issue needs to be addressed with the same intensity and the same resources. The fact of the matter is, somewhere like 800,000 unborn children lose their lives every year from abortion. More children will lose their lives from abortion by lunchtime today than the number of people will lose their lives to the death penalty since it was reinstated in 1976. Wow. So we should be consistent, but we should not allow seamless garment rhetoric to make it seem like pro-lifers are not allowed to address abortion until they have solved every other problem in the world. That's just more of a way to shut up pro-lifers than it is to actually promote consistency in pro-life thinking.
Right. Where else can people find more information about in your book, Persuasive Pro-Life, and other resources?
Yeah, I would recommend that they visit TrentHornPodcast.com. They can get my podcast for free on iTunes, Google Play. It's the Council of Trent, COUNSEL. But they can also sign up to become a supporter at TrentHornPodcast.com. We also have a growing YouTube page, the Council of Trent, on YouTube. And then, of course, they can also check out Catholic Answers at Catholic.com.
And also some interesting topics like what to do if you're arrested. You have one about the witness protection program.
So, yes. So my podcast, Council of Trent, I am equipping people to have conversations about the faith with others. But on Fridays, I like to have Free For All Friday, where I just talk about anything that I find interesting to me, and it's just a nice way for people to relax on Friday before the weekend. And those shows actually have served a goal of pre-evangelization, that you may have a friend who's not interested in religion whatsoever, but he could be interested in one of the more miscellaneous topics on my podcast. And so people have done this. They have sent their non-religious friends kind of the more miscellaneous shows I cover on the podcast. And if they say, hey, I really like this guy, I like what he was talking about, then they're like, oh, well, he also has this show on a religious topic you might find interesting. So those shows, they are fun, but they actually do serve an evangelization purpose.
All right. Well, people can check it out. The Council of Trent is the podcast, and Persuasive Pro-Life also, the book. Very good resource. So thank you so much, Trent Horn. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.